Welcome into Bluejay Breakdown Postgame Edition as we come to you live from our respective homes here in Omaha, Nebraska. Austin, what's going on, man?
Way to clear up that we were in Omaha, Nebraska. That would have been really bad if we weren't. What a day to be from Omaha, because you definitely wanted to be from Lincoln today. Can I say that this feels like more than just a microcosm of the season for the Creighton Blue Jays? This feels like we're now teetering on the brink of like major concern. Major concern.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest. I was at major concern before this game.
Yeah.
To be fair, like I think this is. I don't know if I thought the margin might be a little closer, but I'll be honest. I didn't see this going a ton differently than this. Like this has been who these two teams are on the season so far. Nebraska showed, I think, the kind of well-rounded combination. Like Nate Lenzer's been terrific for this team in terms of defense since he's come aboard. It's really kind of changed the dynamic of who they are as a defensive team. And Creighton has been a team entirely without identity the entire season.
Yeah.
Even when they've played well, I at least, I don't want to speak for anybody else, I never felt like, oh, they've figured it out. You know what I mean? Like I never,
Yeah.
at no point, even, first half against Oregon, which I guess is probably the only time I've actually thought they've played really well. At no point have I been like, oh yeah, they've got it. Like this is the team that has figured out the pieces and where to put them together and things like that. So, again, the margin might be a little surprising. Probably thought this. I mean, Vegas had this at 5.5. I thought that was pretty safe for Nebraska here. Like Nebraska, especially at this point in the season, is a much better basketball team than Creighton. Like there's no way around that. And somebody said rank Nebraska ? In the comments. Like I don't know how you don't at this point. Like this is a good basketball team. This is probably one of the top 25 basketball teams in the country. And as we've seen, Creighton has struggled with that caliber of opponent so far because they have, I genuinely think they have no idea who they are.
Yeah. And I think it shows too how interesting this rivalry always seems to be, that Nebraska always seems to be the less coordinated one, that they're the ones still looking for an identity. They're going to play scrappy. They're going to, be the more defensive team. It was the exact opposite. And Creighton came in as the underdog. They played like the underdog. I thought the only chance that Creighton really had to make this a game was to play it as much at the 3-point line that they could. And did they try to in that first half? I mean, my God, did they have some struggles there? And if Isaac Trout hadn't hit the first one, I don't know if they would have gotten any of there in that entire first 20 minutes of the game. It was not great movement. It was a lack of identity. It was tough to watch at different times too. And I just think that there's a lot of soul searching to do for Creighton over the next 2 weeks, truthfully. And if they don't recover and get ready for Saturday and get a win over Kansas State at home, this whole season is on the brink of kind of an utter unraveling that I'm not sure that a lot of Creighton people, even with the injuries, even with everything that's went on, would have prepared for even coming into today.
Yeah, so I think the injuries are an important thing to talk about here, and not because, frankly, I don't know how much of a difference it would have made if Hudson Greer and Jackson McAndrew both play. I think it stays closer, obviously, because Jackson McAndrew is a really good basketball player. I expect him to play in the NBA someday. And Hudson Greer has already shown as a freshman some of the things that Creighton needed today. The problem Creighton has, and that they absolutely cannot fix this year, is the point guard spot. There is nothing they can do this year to fix the point guard spot, and that causes issues for every other facet of this team. Now, defensively, there is a whole other set of issues, and we can talk about that. But from an offensive standpoint, you look at it and you go, this team was betting on Nick Graves being able to become the point guard they needed, or for Josh Dix to be able to become the point guard they needed, or for Ty Davis to develop into being ready to play these type of minutes in major college basketball. And none of those things have happened. So unless one of those things miraculously happens over the course of the season, and I say miraculously because I don't think it's likely. Nick Graves is kind of who he is. We're several years into his college career at this point. He kind of is who he is. Same thing with Josh Dix. he kind of is who he is at this point. And both are good players in their own rights. Neither are really the point guard Creighton needs in this particular season. So, that to me is the poison pill for this team, is that neither of those guys or no combination of those guys has seemed to be able to figure out how to run this team offensively. And if that doesn't happen, there'll be nights better than this. I mean, they shot the ball unbelievably poorly, but it's not a coincidence that Creighton shoots the ball routinely poorly against this Nebraska team. The Nebraska game plan for them has been make them shoot stagnant threes, right? And by stagnant threes, I mean no flow, not a part of the offense, not coming in rhythm. And let me tell you, there's a huge difference between an open inflow rhythm three and even an open stagnant three. And all Creighton has gotten in the last 4 years against Nebraska has been stagnant threes. And they only made enough one of those years, and mostly because Baylor Shireman went supernova on them, to actually win a game that way. It's really hard to win a game making stagnant shots and having no flow on offense whatsoever, especially when you don't have such good and such dynamic one-on-one players to overcome a lack of offensive fluidity. Creighton's probably never going to be that style of team. Now, they've got a couple guys that are better one-on-one than they used to, right? Like Austin Schwartz showed some things tonight. Like he can be pretty decent one-on-one. Blake Harper has shown some things throughout the course of the season where he can be pretty good one-on-one. But the fact of the matter is Creighton could not consistently compromise Nebraska's defense in any way and was left with almost exclusively stagnant shots. And you're not going to beat very many quality basketball teams this year. And make no mistake, Nebraska is a quality basketball team.
Yeah. Well, good save there. I mean, honestly, that's where it's going to be next, right? Because the conversation is going to turn to, okay, well, Creighton's played maybe 4 top 25 teams up to this point, and maybe they've just played a tougher schedule than the team that they are currently. And that's all entirely possible. But, you bring up a couple of guys, and I know on the last episode of Bluejay Breakdown, when you were talking with Jacob Padilla about Jason Green's kind of role and what that looks like. I don't know how he fits, just like we're having the conversation now, where he fits with everywhere, or who fits everywhere with where the current roster is constructed. But Jason Green still looks like the glue guy that he has been in seasons past, but there's no one to stick to. Like, you can tell that he's still going out there. He's gritting through injury. There's not really anything that he isn't doing that's outside of what we've seen him do before. And even coming into today, he's actually had statistically, like, per percentage, a pretty decent year comparative to some of the years past where he's been. But yet there's just nothing around him that really emphasizes his role as that player. So then you have him being like an exaggerated version of having to play out of his mind for Creighton to have any type of success. And there's just, I'll be honest, I was disappointed in what Owen Freeman did today. I never thought that he really had anything that was too significant in a 21-point loss. When you look at what Josh Dix performed, and then you look across the court too, and I think that's what's most disappointing, not because it's just Nebraska, not because it's the in-state rivalry, but you look across the court and you see their former Iowa teammate doing what you thought that Dix and Freeman would be able to contribute for Creighton in different capacities. Sanford was able to make a couple of big splash plays early. He had a big forced turnover in that first half too. And it just felt like there have been so many chances so far, especially just in this game and in the microcosm that the Nebraska loss will be for Creighton, that there's been too many times when everything is just so out of sync and your biggest names just aren't performing up to the expectation level that you thought they would.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point because obviously I think all of those three guys, let's talk about the Iowa transfers for a minute, right? Price Sanford at Nebraska, Owen Freeman and Josh Dix at Creighton. And I think in a vacuum, they're all probably similar levels of players, even though they're all different types of players, right? Like different roles, different strengths, different weaknesses. The difference here is, and this is the thing that, and we can talk about Hoiberg here for a second. Mark asks if we can talk about the turnaround that Hoiberg has had. This is the thing that Creighton has always been very good at that Nebraska has struggled with that you kind of alluded to earlier, that has completely flipped in this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that is Sanford is an incredible fit for what Nebraska is doing right now. Freeman and Dix just don't seem to have a sense, and I'm not sure Creighton has a sense of where they need to be fitting, because there is, as I mentioned at the start here, there seems to be no sense of identity of who this Creighton team is or who they even want to be, right? It looks different on almost every possession. It looks different for every different formation of lineup that goes in there, right? So when that's the case, it's really hard to fit new pieces together. Now, it's a chicken or an egg thing, right? You've got a bunch of new pieces and you don't really have an identity. So is the identity the thing that is missing, or is it the pieces not fitting into the identity that's missing, right? So it's hard to tell, but the point is Price Sanford is so successful right now because of the fact that he fits exactly what Nebraska needs him to do. And I don't think Dix or Freeman totally even know what Creighton needs from them right now.
Right.
Right.
And I mean, the question isn't that Creighton isn't talented. I mean, you could look at the cost of the rosters more than likely. You can also look to see who had the higher rated transfer portal class and who had the higher recruits like on their current roster. Those stars do matter, especially in college basketball, but identity seems to matter even more. And it's just like you said from the beginning. Nebraska was the better team when they started the day, when they woke up and got out of bed this morning, and they're going to be the better team when they go to bed tonight. And Creighton may be the more talented individuals, but without that piece that is just keeping them all together or just assigning roles or to have an idea of what everyone needs to do to contribute to win, they're not going to get this figured out anytime soon. They're going to have multiple come to Jesus's meetings before they can figure that out. And unfortunately for them, time is starting to run out on them to figure that out and find out what those roles and what that identity needs to be.
Yeah, so that's a good point, because this feels a lot, ironically enough, this feels a lot like an early Hoiberg Nebraska team. And I'm talking about Creighton, where you look at it and you go like, oh, that guy's pretty good, and that guy's pretty good, and that guy's pretty good, but I have no idea what this roster is assembled together, right? I said this many times in the first at least 3 years, maybe 4 years of Hoiberg's tenure, where I go, this roster doesn't make any sense together. And that's kind of where Creighton found themselves. I think they were hoping that certain pieces would fall into place a little bit better or develop in a different way, or maybe certain aspects of their games would be emphasized in a more dramatic way. But the truth is, none of that happened. And it's kind of hoping. God, what was that guy's name? Like the Arizona State point guard that came into Nebraska. I want to say it was like Alonzo or something. I don't know. But there was an Arizona State transfer that came into Nebraska in Hoiberg's second or third year that they tried to make a point guard, and he was just never a point guard. Like, it was just never going to make any sense whatsoever. And that seems like what Creighton did this year. And I don't know if they didn't think they could get a more traditional point guard in the portal. I don't know if they thought Nick Graves could be somebody else, or Josh Dix could be somebody else, or that Ty Davis was going to be somebody else. But the fact is, this roster doesn't make a ton of sense unless a lot of guys start to play different types of basketball than we've seen. It also cannot be overstated that we're currently seeing what appears to be like a 40% version of Owen Freeman. And I do think that matters a lot, because one thing that can really overcorrect for guard play that is a little lackluster, or trying to find its footing at the very least, is having a big man that can score in the post. And make no mistake, a healthy Owen Freeman is a big man that can score in the post. He has had flashes this year. He just doesn't look comfortable. And I don't know if that's something that's going to happen at some point this year, or if Creighton's just going to have to wait it out and hope next year. Alonzo Verge, thank you, Mr. Bell. That was the Arizona State player.
And but I agree with you too. And that's like, I don't want to keep spinning our tires on this, because we both agree on the same point. But the question is like, where do you go? What do you do next? Because when Creighton was having these issues last year, You still had Ryan Kalkbrenner. You still had Stephen Ashworth, who was there. You still felt comfortable with where Jemiah Neal actually ended up as the season progressed. But at this point a year ago, Jemiah Neal was not where he ended up being. And
no, but he was on his way. You could
yes,
you could see he was on his way.
Yes, and you could start to tell, okay, now they're starting to get it figured out. They obviously had the Kansas game, but then they had to refigure out everything once they had that major injury and then, move on from what the style of the play was after the Kansas game. I don't know where you start with this because unfortunately for Creighton, as successful as the Nichols game I thought looked, and I thought that they were trending in the right direction in what they wanted to be, who they were becoming, it just turned out that their biggest warts continue just to hurt them in these bigger matchups. And I don't know where you start with a positive for them to say, okay, here's where you're going to be. So that way we can be successful in getting to, the Big East, whatever our new expectation is. Because at this point, the Big East isn't necessarily up for grabs, but where Creighton's position in the Big East is definitely in question.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to remember here that, you talked about kind of the roster and the individuals a minute ago. And I meant to bring this up, but I got distracted by something. I know that's a surprise, but even Nebraska, like I talked to a lot of Nebraska fans in the offseason, and almost universally, not just nationally, not just local, like I think it was pretty universal. Like people thought Creighton had the better roster.
Yes.
Like individually, yeah. I think people thought Creighton had the better roster. And you mentioned identity is a huge part of what's winning for Nebraska right now. And I think Rink Mast is playing better than any of us anticipated. That's also a huge part. And that to me is one of the biggest differences here because as everyone around Rink Mast can figure out, Jamarcus Lawrence is coming back, but he's in a new role kind of than he was 2 years ago when he was at Nebraska. Sam Hoiberg is taking on a larger role. Braden Frager is new.
Yeah.
Cale Jacobsen is taking on a larger role, right? Like you have all these guys, even though some of them are similar pieces, almost all of them are in new roles. Rink Mast allows you to have something to be centered around. That was the Ryan Kalkbrenner Creighton had experience for the last 5 years. They had something that they could center everything else around, no pun intended because of positionally, but that was the epicenter of their team and say, hey, if all else fails, we can fall back on this.
But
right?
Isn't that supposed to be Owen Freeman? That's where my frustration comes in. Like if you're a Creighton fan,
that's where his health is a huge issue.
Right. And it's almost one of those like, okay, so if Freeman's not good to go, do we have a chance to pivot somewhere else? Like, do we rely more on Josh Dix? Is it supposed to be Nick Graves? And I know that you have your different ideals about where Nick Graves is supposed to be, but it feels like they're trying to trend one direction and try to move away from because Freeman's not 100%, whether it's stamina, whether it's health, whether it's anything else, but they haven't found it. And it's not even in like the totality of a game. I'm talking about even in miniature moments of the contest when you're looking for just a bucket to score in the first 3 minutes. They're just shooting up prayers and not moving and not doing anything to try to get a secondary option or a look. The first 3-pointer that they hit from Trout was crossing half court and passing to him basically 3/4 of the court of the way down and him hitting nearly a logo shot. I mean, that was their first 3-pointer that they were able to connect to.
Those are those stagnant threes they're stagnant shots that I talked about that are impossible to sustain an offense on, right? So you ask, what is the option here, right? And to me, I think you have to really lean into, I honestly think you have to lean into guys that can create on their own. And they have a few, right? I think you have to lean into an Austin Schwartz, whatever that means. Because here's the thing. We knew this team was going to struggle defensively regardless. And they actually weren't that bad today. Like, you'll take it if you give up 71 points.
Right.
The problem was,
I mean, it's below the Nebraska average. So kind of one, I guess. Yeah, in that way.
The problem is they shot 31% from the field. So I think at a certain point, if you're Creighton, you have to look at, okay, what am I sacrificing from an offensive standpoint to be functional defensively? And they gave up 66 to Oregon. They got away with it. Obviously, Gonzaga's really good. we're just going to chalk that up to Gonzaga's better than Creighton and is going to be all year. Same thing with Iowa State. You kind of played more of a shootout fashion in Baylor, and maybe that's where McDermott's thought process started to shift a little bit. But I'm going to be honest with you, this team doesn't have enough players that, and we saw this all day against Nebraska, they don't have enough players that can stay in front of a dribbler, a penetrator, a driver, whatever you want to call them, to consistently get stops on defense, even though they only gave up 71 points to Nebraska. So if you're not going to be able to stop somebody on defense and you can't get by somebody on the dribble on offense, that doesn't leave you a lot of options, right? Matt DeMarinis, I was texting with him during the game, brought that very specific point up. Like, if you can't stop the dribble on defense and you can't penetrate on offense, you don't have any other choices, really, especially when you're shooting the ball, 19% from three or 24%, I think, from three for the game. So, like, what I think your options are if you're Creighton is to look at the guys that can win one-on-one matchups offensively, because I don't think you have anybody that can win one-on-one matchups defensively. So what's your other option? Who are my guys that can win one-on-ones offensively? That's Austin Schwartz. That's Blake Harper. That is, I do think Fedor Zugic. He can attack closeouts at the very least.
I agree.
He's certainly higher on that list than a lot of guys on the team. I do think Josh Dix is on that list. I think if Owen Freeman is healthy, he's on that list. But if he's not, like, it's hard to play him if he's not healthy, because that lack of health also hurts you on the defensive end.
Yes.
So if he's not healthy, like, it's almost like, hey, I don't know if it's has to play himself into shape thing, or if it is an actual, like, there's still a pain tolerance thing going on there. But there is, if he's not able to do anything for you on either end of the floor consistently, because we have seen flashes, but I mean consistently, I think you have to look at, like, okay, so maybe we go like with a Jason Green, or maybe we go, like, I know people don't love Isaac Trout defensively, but at least he can shoot the ball, I think you have to look at what someone can bring you in those other areas, because right now I know that they love Ty Davis as a culture guy. He doesn't, he really struggles against high level opponents, against power conference opponents. I know that they want to try and figure some things out with Nick Graves, because he was a guy they brought in to be important. To me, he can win some one-on-one matchups. To me, he's a sixth man kind of microwave off the bench guy, where you say, hey, we're going to play you for like a 4 or 5 minute stretch and see how you're doing today. Because he's a pretty hot and cold type player. If it's not one of those days, you switch it over and you say, hey, this isn't the Nick Graves day. You maybe give him a couple stretches in each half, see if he's got it. And if he doesn't, you move a different direction, right?
Yeah.
I think you have to start making some of those decisions, because what is this, 9 games into the season?
This was game 9, so game 10 will be Saturday, yes.
So we're a third of the way through the regular season, right? I think it's overly optimistic at best to expect the chemistry to click at some point, especially when you've had so many injuries. If Hudson Greer comes back, he's a guy that can win one-on-one matchups as well. Put him in the lineup also. I don't know what his time frame looks like, right? But I don't know that it's realistic this year to expect the chemistry to just click at some point. So what can you do in the meantime, right? What can you do in the here and now to give yourself a chance? And I don't think waiting for the chemistry to click gives you a chance in the meantime.
Well, I think on that same note too, every single game is, there's no other way to put this. Every single game is your season moving forward, and you have to treat it as such, right? Because it's what you were just saying, that if you can't figure out, hey, this is what we're going to try to build for the next 20 games of our year, especially going into conference play, we have to start finding little bits and pieces of success that we can start to string together and build out, so that way we can find a way to win. Now, luckily, for the first time in a long time, Creighton has 6 days to actually get ready, prepare. I don't think that means Hudson Greer is going to be healthy enough to come back if he was in a boot today by any means, but you got to be able to figure something out in the next 6 days to say, we have to find a winning formula for Kansas State. And then after that, you got to find a winning formula for Xavier and then keep on moving down the line from there. I think you just start that way because that's kind of your first answer is how do we attack the next team with all of our flaws, with everything we can't do? What's the first thing we can do to find a way to win the next game? And then you kind of just keep stringing it along until you can figure it out from there. I was just looking at the box score while you were going through, Ravi. When was the last time you saw a Creighton game where all starters didn't have double digits? I mean, there's not a single starter that had double figures tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that's I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, there's been a handful of kind of dreadful offensive performances just intermittently throughout the years, but I can't remember a time where no starter had double digits. Like that's pretty aggressive.
Yeah. And
so,
just going
yeah,
through that
go
same
ahead.
note, like you had said, Swartz ended up with 16 points. He led the team. Freeman was an 0 for 1 from the field. He ended up with 4 rebounds in total. Josh Dix and Nick Graves each had 9. The team finished 16 of 52, 8 of 33 from 3. And on the opposite side, 20 points for Rink Mast, 15 for Sam Hoiberg, which, again, in any circumstance of this game, if Sam Hoiberg ended up 6 of 10 from the field and had 15 points, Nebraska's going to win a lot of those games. So there's also that aspect of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of like what you said there in you just go kind of game by game at this point and say, hey, what do we think can get us a win against Kansas State? What do we think can get us a win against Xavier? And listen, I know in years past that, Creighton has been able to kind of weather early season struggles and get through and find themselves later in the year. The elephant in the room here is they do not have any connective tissue really from previous years to give them that kind of confidence to be able to do that, right? So I do think we are dealing with a very different situation here for Creighton. Hot Danger said earlier, it would help if it looked like Creighton gave a damn. I think, not to use a Nebraska football analogy for everything, but I think it's a lot like we saw Nebraska's defense, who they just hired a new defensive coordinator this like as we came on the air, basically.
Yes.
But like I think a lot of what people perceived as an effort issue with Nebraska's defense and maybe what they perceive as an effort issue with Creighton's team this year is a hesitancy issue. When you're hesitant, when you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, when you have a lack of chemistry, you look slow, you sometimes look lazy, you look unathletic, but really you're just unsure. When you can make people feel sure of what they're doing, it's much easier to give full effort. It's much easier to look fast and athletic and fluid. And I think it's entirely possible that's the case for Creighton right now. I think they're searching for that chemistry in a system that Greg McDermott has successfully taught for the last 15 years, basically. Is it longer than that now? It's definitely longer than that now. But that is, I don't know if at this point that's on the table for this particular team. Maybe it is, but they are further away from that than I ever anticipated they would be a third of the way through the season. And we haven't seen flashes of it frequently enough for me to believe that that's still on the table.
Okay, so last question I have for you then, Ravi.
Yeah.
Is Kansas State a must-win game?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's I think so. I think it is because
like in terms of the entire season, right? In terms of an NCAA tournament bid, if you're still looking at that sort of expectation, if that is still the expectation, it certainly is for Creighton as a program. You probably looked at this week with where your season was at the point before you entered this game with Nebraska. You probably had to split. Now you have to win against Kansas State because the Big East is not going to give you enough to be able to boost a resume, and you're not going to get enough credit in conference play, more than likely.
Yeah, so Kansas State, I was just looking up while you were talking there. Kansas State is, I prefer Ken Palm to net ratings, but Kansas State is 82 in the Ken Palm. Creighton is around 70. So this is a winnable game for Creighton, and any game that's in the neighborhood of your of kind of your level of team, you have to go get, because you're going to have a really hard time at this point winning against teams that are better than you until you figure some things out in terms of who you are. So you have to go get the ones against teams that are in your neighborhood or below you. That's the thing that's been, I suppose, the saving grace for Creighton at this point. Haven't lost to a bad team yet, right?
Yeah.
Like, I like Baylor's not bad. Maybe they're not typical Baylor, but that's not a bad team. They're top 35. Ken Palm. Iowa State's obviously very good. Gonzaga's very good. Nebraska's very good. Nebraska and Baylor actually in kind of in the same neighborhood in terms of their rating. So like Creighton hasn't taken a loss to a team that's clearly that's even really in the same neighborhood as them, much less worse than they are. So like they have to win all of the games against teams that are equal or lesser to than they are, then that is a must win to me, because I think they're still a decent ways away from being able to beat better teams. And so you have to eat on the ones that are in your neighborhood in order to continue to give yourself a chance moving forward. Because, I mean, it's Creighton. Like the expectation always is the NCAA tournament, right?
Yes.
Even in a kind of, I'll call it a rebuilding year, because they brought in like 8 new guys. Like I don't know what else to call it. Like that's a rebuilding year. Even if you like the pieces, like it's still a rebuild.
Well, some would have called it reloading, but I mean that's where we are now. Is like you have to restructure how the season looks. Like that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're saying this is a rebuilding season.
Yeah, and TK said from minute 5, Mac was searching for any form of answer. I'll be honest, TK, from minute 5 of like the season, like this has been this isn't. I don't expect Nebraska fans to watch all of Creighton games or anything like that, but and I know we have more Nebraska fans in the chat here today than we typically do, which is awesome. We appreciate having you here, but like this is not new for Creighton. This has been who Creighton is over the course of the year, where they are just searching for any type of identity, frankly, on both ends of the floor. Like
outside of the Iowa State exhibition, that has what it's been. Yeah.
Which just looks like a huge outlier now. Like it just looks like obviously that was not any sort of indicator of who Creighton is as a basketball team. And so at a certain point, you have to say, hey, that's an exhibition that you just put over here, and say it was an exhibition for a reason. It doesn't count. Got to move on and see what Creighton actually is. And at this point in the season, I don't think they could give you a good answer, because I certainly can't either on who this team is. I never thought I'd sit here and say, hey, the best way forward might be, like ISO offense on basketball. That might be the best way forward, because I don't know that they have enough time left or enough healthy pieces to find any sort of chemistry to create an offense that we're used to seeing from Creighton.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's like I said, as dumb as it is, as cliche as it is, it's just one game at a time. You got to win against Kansas State. Get into Big East play, and piece by piece, you'll figure this out, because luckily you have Mac. Luckily you have Alan Huss. Luckily you've got good athletic and, like I said, talented pieces. Like even in the Big East, this Creighton roster, in terms of stars, in terms of what they've been rated, they are one of the more talented teams in the conference. But if those pieces don't come together, they will continue to look like they did today. And if they can't match their opponents, it's going to continue to look like what happened today. And 50 points is nowhere near winning basketball for Creighton. It's not for a lot of teams, but especially for Creighton. There is just no hope in a Big East conference that you're going to be able to continue to win at a level that you need to when you put up the offensive numbers that you had in this game.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason Creighton was ranked 3rd in the conference preseason. There's a reason they were top 25 preseason ranked. People like the talent on the roster. It's just not anywhere near come together the way anyone, including national, local, and I would guess in the locker room of Creighton, have expected whatsoever. And Creighton probably realistically has to score 75 to 80 points a game in order to give themselves a shot. Like they have to give themselves an opportunity, because they're not capable of, currently it doesn't appear they're capable of defending at a level to win games that are scoring less than that. right? Like
Yep.
that's just not on the table for them. So when you say they specifically cannot win games, like you're right. It is like there are teams like we've seen Virginia win a national title doing this, right? Like
Yes.
they're not like Creighton is not built to defend at a level where anything less than 60 points is a winnable number. I would say anything less than 70 points is not really a winnable number on a consistent basis. You may have one-offs and outliers,
Mhm.
but on a consistent basis, Creighton's going to have to score 70 to 80 points a game to give themselves a shot. And the way they've been playing offensively, it's going to be a struggle to score 70 to 80 points a game until they figure something out. And they very well might, right? Al Huss is one of the better offensive minds in the country. Greg McDermott's one of the better offensive minds in the country. Um, it's entirely possible they do figure something out, but they are further away from that than I thought they would be at this point in the year.
I'll just say I'll finish with this. My last thought: I would hate to be a practice gym at Creighton for the next 5 days. I'd hate to be a practice gym. That would
Should
be brutal. I cannot imagine that anyone's going to have any fun out there.
should we appease TK here and give a couple Nebraska ball thoughts real quick before we get out of here?
I think it is fair. Obviously, this is Bluejay Breakdown, but obviously we're coming to you from the Hurrdat Sports channels. That's Ravi, Lulla. I'm Austin Jacobsen. In case you're just tuning in, Nebraska wins 71-50. And you're going to hit on this on Hurrdat Sports Live over the next couple of days. They're for real. They're more than for real. And I think they're very alive in the Big Ten. This feels like a more complete team and also a better chance of not having to win off of one marquee moment, a couple of big individual performances like they did a couple of years ago with Keisei Tominaga and getting into the tournament 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This feels like a real Nebraska basketball team that finally has everything pieced together under Fred Hoiberg and looks like a Fred Hoiberg team. And I know that, again, you said like in the offseason, it was that conversation of, okay, well, what are these pieces going to do? What role is everyone having? It looks like everyone understands their role and hasn't figured out. I mean, Frager can come in and be able to get you a bucket. Sanford does a lot for you. And Mast is everything that you need to kind of complete the puzzle. They're a very, very good team. And again, I don't think that they're not the best team in the Big Ten, but I think they're very alive with some of the best teams, and they can compete with some of the best teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah, so I think kudos to Fred Hoiberg for being able to identify and place guys within a system with a true identity, right? I think identity is the big difference between the current iterations of these two teams with Nebraska and Creighton. And so I think that is a huge piece. I do think in terms of, if you want to talk like ceiling and long-term and all that kind of stuff for Nebraska this season, I do think there is a chance they'll still struggle with hyper athletic teams like the Texas A&M team they ran into a couple years ago in the NCAA tournament. I will say this version of Rink Mass gives them a better chance against those types of teams. I get that he was on that team as well, but that was a Keisei Tominaga centric team. This is a Rink Mass centric team. Having a big man that can compromise a defense really, really evens the playing field athletically against teams that can kind of eat you up on the perimeter with athleticism. Now, getting him the ball could end up being a challenge against some of those teams, but I do think he really does level things out in a way that Nebraska hasn't really had a guy that leveled things out when there was athletic disparities the way there has been in the past. The one thing I will say, if we're looking long-term concerns for Nebraska, I don't have a ton. I will say high-end athleticism is probably one of them.
Yeah.
The other one would be backcourt free throw shooting. Jamarcus Lawrence, not a great free throw shooter. Sam Hoiberg is okay, 73%. Cale Jacobsen, not a good free throw shooter. Price Sanford he's kind of in that tweener forward spot. I would consider him more of a forward than a guard. But if you're late in game, close game situations, and you've got a bunch of guys handling the basketball that are sort of struggling from the free throw line, that could lose you games that you should normally win. So if we're talking projections, big picture stuff, I would say high-end athleticism and backcourt free throw shooting would be the things that would concern me. But I mean, this is a team that seems to know who they are. They know who they want to be. And most importantly, and Nick Baugh brought this up, and I can end on this. And I think this was the biggest difference between Nebraska and Creighton on both ends of the floor is Nebraska knew exactly what a good possession looked like. And I
Yes.
don't
Yeah.
think Creighton has figured out what a good possession looks like for them on offense or on defense. And until they figure that out, they're going to continue to struggle when they play equal or better talent, or equal or better teams. Nebraska, I think, is going to be able to punch above their weight in terms of individual talent this year because they can go into every possession and know this is my objective on this individual possession. And that is incredibly valuable as a basketball team. And their ability to focus on that on a possession in and possession out basis is going to be probably the difference between whatever their ceiling is. But so far this year, that's something they've been super dialed in on, and all credit in the world goes to Fred Hoiberg, because 3 years into this thing, didn't think we'd be here having this conversation at all.
No, and honestly, most coaches who went on that first 3-year run that he did wouldn't be in this position right now. So and I know that obviously wrapping up and whatnot, but the bottoming out for Nebraska in a game, even that we saw a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever the case has been, you didn't see it in these first 10 games. They've found their way to like get out of their worst. Like Nebraska basketball this season, their absolute worst that they can play in a game seems to be much closer to where their actual like balance of an equilibrium is. And they're not going to just lose a game because of a bad 5-minute stretch anymore. They might lose it because maybe they're on an off day or they're going to, face some good competition. We're going to find out in their next 2 games. But they are a much better team, and they just don't have those low end, lowest of lows in games, at least in these first 9 games for them. And I think that that's what's made me more confident in what they look like moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the huge benefits of finding your identity, is that you raise your floor dramatically. When you
Yes.
know who you are and you know who you want to be and you know what each individual possession is supposed to look like, you raise your floor dramatically, and the chances of it falling out from beneath you go way, way down. Still possible. It happens. People have bad days, bad weeks, whatever. It goes down. The chances of it happening go down dramatically, and that's where Nebraska finds itself a third of the way through the season, and that is the exact opposite of the place that Creighton finds itself a third of the way through the season. So,
Yep.
that's all I got.
Absolutely. Yep. That's all I got. Wrap us up, Ravi.
All right, that is Bluejay Breakdown Postgame Edition. Nebraska wins their 3rd out of 4 in the I-80 rivalry, 71-50 over Creighton. That's Austin Jacobsen. I'm Ravi Lulla. You can catch me the rest of the week on Hurrdat Sports Live. You can catch Austin all over the place. He's always doing stuff. Make sure you check out the Hurrdat Sports channels, and you'll see his bright and shining face on there more often than not. So we appreciate you guys joining us, and if you want to hear about Nebraska's new defensive coordinator, tune in tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. That's all we got. Thanks, guys.